Premier, what sort of changes are we going to see this week after the meeting of National Cabinet today?
Look, I think all of the states are really craving just to have a bit of certainty around the likely number of doses we're going to get and then to plan forward to that. I mean, in New South Wales alone, we have a population of 6 million adults we need to vaccinate, 2.9 million of which are over the age of 50. So there is still much opportunity for us to look at the program, to see where we can bring things forward and to make sure that we do have a sufficient number of our population vaccinated by a certain point in time so that we can consider those next steps in our COVID recovery. We know that COVID is a volatile situation. We're in a pandemic. Parts of the world are still going through additional phases of cases. And in some parts of the world, it's actually worse now than it was, a year ago.
Your health minister was on the program a couple of weeks ago saying that there was poor communication and that you weren't getting reliable information about how many doses of vaccine were coming through and when. Are you saying that's still the case?
Well, I think part of the Prime Minister's consideration in having National Cabinet meet more frequently is to make sure that that's addressed. I think he's listened to what we've said. I certainly am someone that likes to plan ahead, and I also think New South Wales should be ready because there's always every opportunity that you might suddenly be told you have an extra tens of thousands of doses in a week. Well, if that's the case, let us make sure we have the ability to scale up and provide those doses to people. There's no doubt in my mind, and I want to dispute some comments made by others last week, that when the vast majority of our population is vaccinated, it does give us more opportunity to consider international travel and trade and, reuniting with family, all those things we've craved and haven't been able to do for the last while.
I'll come back to that in a moment, but one of the things that's confusing is that we know now that there has to be a surplus of AstraZeneca vaccine in the country because people under 50 aren't getting it. So why is it that it's not rapidly and immediately being dispersed to people over 50?
Well, Lee, I confess that's one of the questions I'll be asking or what I've been pressing, and that's why I've made the point earlier that 2.9 million people in New South Wales are 50 years and over, and I have to admit being 50 in a few months. So I'm in that category, and I've had my first jab of the AstraZeneca. So there's 2.9 million people my age and older in New South Wales who do have access to that vaccine, and I think whilst we do have supply there, we should get the dose out to as many people as possible because that gives protection to our population.
But what are you being told, though, about supply? Because you can talk about distribution, but if there's nothing to distribute, then, what can you do? So what is the federal government telling you about supply and when there will be adequate and rapid supply?
Well, I think they'll be firming up some of that information for us later this week and next week.
Are you surprised that they haven't been able to so far? Because we've known now for, 2 weeks or so that we've got this problem with the AstraZeneca?
Yeah, I think there's an issue of precision in these matters, and that's why, as far as New South Wales is concerned, and I'm happy to wear any criticism regarding this, I think we should be ready in case there is a supply of vaccines that comes on our doorstep, whether it's Pfizer, whether it's AstraZeneca, whether it's another type of vaccine. We need to be ready because the quicker we're able to vaccinate our population safely, the better it is for us in terms of health safety, but also in terms of the economy and jobs and international trade. In New South Wales alone, we lose about $1.5 billion a month because our international borders aren't open. And whilst health always comes first in our consideration, we do need to think about the future. You can't have the rest of the world opening up at a certain point and not Australia. And that's why I think we need to be ready.
You mentioned before about travel and opening borders. When this coronavirus crisis began, Australians were told that lockdowns were required, border closures were needed so that hospitals wouldn't be overwhelmed. And that's been achieved now for the best part of a year. So why are we being told now by the Federal Health Minister last week that even when the whole population is vaccinated, that life can't return to basically normal?
Well, I'm happy to dispute those comments, Lee. I think that we can take a different approach when the majority of our population is vaccinated, and that's why I'm really keen to make sure safe vaccines are offered to as many people in New South Wales as possible and, of course, Australia as possible in the next few months and beyond.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it clear to you why the Federal Health Minister has that different view and whether that's the view that's going to prevail?
Well, that's his view, and he's the health minister, but I think you need to consider both the health issues and the economic impact. And the health advice we have says obviously vaccination supports reducing the chance of you getting the virus and certainly reducing the chance of you transmitting the virus. Now, it doesn't mean you've eliminated that risk. No vaccine is 100% perfect. However, it does, when you massively reduce the risk, it means you can consider those other things. But it also means we do need to think differently about how we deal with COVID. And I know this isn't a popular thing to say, but we don't measure every year the number of people that get the flu. However, we do measure or think about how many people have to be hospitalised because of the flu. And perhaps that's an approach we need to take to COVID moving forward, because if we're going to have to live with this for years, and without sounding, I'm always an optimist, but we know the virus is going to be around for some time, we're going to have to live with it.
Premier, thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.